getting ready for some serious motorcycle workshop home foolery. Let's get into this one.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. I hope you're all well. So this video is all about me getting ready for a motorcycle stripped down major engineering works. Yeah, I've decided that I'm going to bring forward the engine strip down of that Ryohu Marathon 125. The engine's still running fine, but if you've been watching the previous videos, you'll know that I need to swap out the gearbox because it's fried. Anyway, I thought I'd gather some tools and some tools that I hadn't got, but also answer a few questions that I've got over on the website about working on bike engines and that kind of thing, and obviously working on smaller engines as well. So one of the first things that I got asked was, do you take the engine out of the frame, you know, for smaller bikes or even for larger bikes, to work on it? And the answer is, it really depends what you're going to do with that engine. It really depends. If you're just doing peripheral stuff, let's say clutch or piston work, you know, whatever it is, you're going to take the heads off. No, just leave the engine in situ, because the frame is going to act as a third or fourth pair of hands, let's say. So it's actually going to be much better to do it on the bike. Now, it could be, let's say, that in a situation like me, I don't have a motorcycle lift here in the workshop, or one that I can raise it up to kind of this height here where I'm standing up. That and you may struggle, you know, being sat down trying to work on the bike. So it might be better to get the engine out of the bike frame and just put it on a workbench, let's say, and do it that way. So it really depends the situation, but for the most part, and motorcycle manuals will tell you on this particular bit of mechanics that you have to do, you can leave the engine in the frame, especially if it's a really big engine. Yeah, leave it in. Now, the argument for smaller engines, let's say 125s, 250s, 450s, you know, with motocross engines, let's say, well, you know, just take them out of the frame. They're easier to work on. So if you are going to take them out of the frame, you want it to be able to keep it stable on your workbench. And there are many different ways there. You know, people actually weld up jigs. They make up metal jigs and metal frames to hold them. You could even buy motocross or small engine holders, let's say, and they cost quite a lot of money. Or you can just get 4 blocks of wood and screw them together. This is kind of 10-12 inches square, something like that, and it kind of works really well. That you take the engine out and you can just rest it in here, and you're not going to damage anything, and it keeps it relatively stable. So when I come to do this engine change or engine strip down, you'll see me using something like this, and I may modify it a little bit. I may change the dimensions, but again, something like this, really cheap, inexpensive, and it works great. So that kind of thing. So the other question I got was, do you work on a clean engine or do you work on a dirty engine? Now, personally, I absolutely hate working on dirty engines. It really annoys me that I get completely caked in grease and mud, but invariably that's exactly what happens. But all I would say is, before you take the engine out of the bike, just give it a really good wash as much as you can. Get some engine degreaser on there as much as you can. Once you take it out of the frame and you've got it on your workbench, put loads of cardboard all over the place to soak up any of the oil, and just give it a really good scrub. Get as much of that grease, much of that grime off the bike. Not only will it help you when you're stripping down the engines for any dirt to not get into the engine itself, regardless of whether you're going to be cleaning all the components or not, it just makes for a much cleaner, a better, you know, motorcycle strip down, I would say. But again, you know, some people, they love the dirt, they love working on that kind of stuff, and it really depends on your situation as well. You know, do you have a workshop, do you have a covered area where you can work on your bike engine, that kind of thing. But all I'd say is, before you start stripping everything off, before you start taking covers off engine casings, let's say, anything like that, get the engine as clean as you can, and then start working on it. Okay, so other questions that came through on the website regarding engine building or bike building or working on your bike was kind of tooling, what sort of tools that you can get. So I've got a few tools and recently, and I've sort of added to them as well, and I thought I'd kind of share with what I've got. So all the tools that I use for this year, I've put on the website, the products links page. The description to that web page is below. So everything that I use in my workshop, or everything that I use in my videos, it's all there, and I add to that as well. So I'm gonna answer a few specific questions and then bring out some of the tools as well to show you. Okay, so one of the things, or one of the questions that somebody asked me was, how do you use a torque wrench on a bolt that you can't access properly, let's say with a socket, something like that, or it's one of those recessed bolts that's basically got a casing over the top of it that you cannot get a socket over the top. You have to tighten it up from the side, let's say using a normal spanner, right? But how are you going to torque that? Well, there's specific tools for that, and you get these things called crow's feet, right? And there are other variations of this as well, but basically you get your torque wrench and you pop the torque wrench in there, and then you tighten this up, and it acts as, well, an extension of the torque wrench, basically. So you're still tightening up the bolt, as it were, but you're working off the torque wrench to turn this. It works. So these are called crow's feet. So you can get them in imperial, all metric, and all sorts of different sizes. And yes, they can be quite expensive, and you might say to yourself, well, I'm never going to use these again. So you think, well, okay, I'll just get a cheaper version of it. But there we go. So these crow's feet are really good. So one of the other questions I got was about pulling bearings out of engine cases, or putting bearings off bikes in general. Okay, so this is a big question, because there are many different types of bearings, and you'll need different bearing pullers or extractors to be able to get that bearing off or get that bearing out. So let me just show you a couple of them. Okay, this is an inner bearing puller. Now basically what this does is, let's say you've got a bearing that's inside a casing and you can't get to the outer side of the bearing to pull it off. You've got one that goes on the inside of the bearing, let's say, and then this will expand out to grip onto the inside of the bearing, and then you've got to have some way of pulling it out. So you've got these contraptions which go over the top of the insert, as it were, and then you just pop these on. There's a couple of washers that go on there, and basically you're twisting this down to pull the bearing up, or pull the puller up, but this is forcing down on the rest of the casing, let's say, the rest of whatever you're trying to pull it out of. So it adds pressure to it, and then it pulls up, and away you go. You have to see these things in action, but as I say, there's lots of different ways to use this, and basically for inner bearings, that's what you got. So that's one type. So this is another type, again, inner bearing. Looks inner bearing like that, and you slot this into the bearing itself, and you're tightening this up so it forces it out, it flares out, so that it pulls on the inside of the bearing. What you then do here is that you attach this, so now you've got this inside the bearing, and you're going to pull, it's a slide hammer, and you're basically going to slide this out like that. And what this does, it adds a bit of pulling pressure, tapping pressure, or pull tap. I don't even know what the expression would be, but it taps it out, and that's what you're doing. So you'll physically hold the casing, and you'll pull this out like that to actually pull the bearing out. So these are like difficult access ones, and so this slide hammer is a really good way of getting a bearing out. Perfect. Right. So that's that. So let's say if you've got inner bearings, that bearings inside casings, you'll need something like this, or maybe something like that will work. They kind of, one you're pulling out the bearing, and the other one that you're applying pressure to the casing to pull up the bearing through it. So you're kind of working against each other. Different styles, but essentially doing the same job. Right, you've got external bearing pullers, and essentially what this does is, let's say you're able to get behind the bearing is exposed, so it's on a shaft or something. You can get behind the bearing, clasp this behind the bearing, and basically with these different pegs, which will slot inside there like so, like so, and they go on top of there like that, and you can apply pressure with this nut going down on the center part and it on the shaft, let's say. So let me just show. That goes through there like that, that goes through there like that, either side, which is attached to the bearing puller. So this goes onto the shaft portion, and then as you're tightening this down, you're actually pulling the bearing off the shaft. So it's an external bearing puller, as it were. Brilliant. Right, so there we go. So that's an external bearing puller, let's say, and you're just applying the pressure to the shaft and gripping the outside of the bearing to pull it off. Right, here is another one. This is for external bearings again, but you can use these in quite a few different ways, and these are basically like hub pullers or bearing pullers as well. So let me just show you. I think this set has got 3 different sizes, and it works really well. So basically what you've got this inner shaft here, and let's just say you have a bearing or a hub or something that's actually on a shaft. So you lower this down over the external bearing or the hub or whatever it is that you've got on a shaft. These feet grip behind it, let's say, like that. And then you, exactly the same as the other set there, you lower this this center thread to the shaft, and then as you're tightening it down, it's gripping the underside of the bearing or the hub, and it's forcing that hub off. So different sizes for different applications, and what's great about these is that they're quite quick to use, not a lot of setup time, and they just work really well, and they're really sort of flexible, adjustable to whatever size, as opposed to trying to find the right one. This works really well, you know, especially if they're not that stubborn to get off. You just want a quick one to get off, you know, they're really good. So I would say something like that is excellent. Okay, so that's bearings. Let's just quickly talk about valves. Okay, so you'll basically need a valve extractor, let's say, or valve compressor. And basically the way this works is that you'll get the this over the head, either side of the head, and you'll get the correct size fitting for the valve that you've got on your bike, let's say. You'll attach this bolt one end, and this bolt goes through this end. So you put the bolt through there, then you get the right size valve compressor point, and basically you're going to put this over the top of the valve. This goes on the underside of the casing or the head as well, and you'll tighten this down to release the pressure off that valve spring, and then you can take the little collets out, and then you can take all the valve apart. And the same thing when you come to compress it as well, you can use this to compress it, put those little collets in, then release the pressure, and away you go. So a valve compressor is something that you're going to need for your workshop, especially if you're going to be doing this on a regular basis. Now, of course, of course, you can always just take this to a bike shop or somebody who's got one of these, and then they can do the work for you. So, you know, you don't have to get this sort of stuff. The thing is, you can buy these tools quite cheaply now, so it isn't a huge investment, especially if you're only ever going to do it once or twice. So say you can buy these for 20, 30 pounds, let's say, dollars, shekels, whatever it is. And yes, even if they only last for the one job, well, you've just spent £20 as opposed to paying somebody else £50, £60, £100, dollars, whatever, to get the job done. So, you know, the economics work in even buying cheap tools, you know, as long as they work, as long as they don't break as soon as you use them, of course. But again, it really depends. If they do break the first time you use them, then you can always send them back, I suppose, you know. But there we go. Right, so that was some of the questions that I've been asked on the channel recently about tools and about the sorts of tools that I'm going to use on the project build or the engine strip down on that build, but also specific tools for specific tasks. So you kind of have to invest in tooling basically to do these sorts of jobs, or you need to take it somewhere that they can do the job for you. That's basically it. So you don't have to invest in the tooling, you just pay somebody else to do it for you, you know. Right, so quickly before I leave this video, some couple of other things that I've got. Some gasket compound, a Hylamar blue. So if you're ever working on gaskets, I've got a gasket set for this bike now as well. But you know, I'm going to put some extra sealing compound on there. I've got some more sandpaper and some different grade sandpaper. This is 600 grit, but you know, I'm going to get some 1200 grit as well, some fine work if I have to work on certain things. I bought some extra blades the other day for you know, cleaning up gasket surfaces. This is valve grinding paste as well. So if you're ever going to take your valves out and give them a good old clean, it's always worth just, you know, giving your valve or your valve seats a bit of a grind, just so that you're cleaning up the surface a little bit. So you're making sure that when that valve closes, it closes properly and it's not letting gases escape, because that just reduces your engine performance. Okay, I've got some of this stuff as well, some plastic repair. So there's a couple of other things I'm going to be doing as well on the bike, on that one that is, but I think always have some of this in your workshop is all pretty good. And yes, freezer bags for an engine strip down. What's all that for? Well, I'll tell you what, if you know what this is for, let us know in the comments what it is for, what these freezer bags are for. These are little Ziploc bags, you know, there we go. Right, that's it. So I think that's pretty much everything that I've got recently. Yeah, apart from a few spanners, a C spanner and some new type adjustable spanners which I got the other day, which I showed you on the video as well. That's about it. So hopefully that's answered a few questions for some of you guys out there who've been sending in questions as well. I do try and answer as many questions as I can that are sent to me, whether it's tech info stuff, let's say about the Harley, or anything in general. But as I say, I'm certainly no expert, but I just tell you what I use, or the kind of tools that I get for specific tasks, or tools that I haven't used in a long time and I don't have anymore, so that's why I get new tools to start these kinds of jobs again. Anyway, so that's that. But anyway, I hope you found that useful. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, like and share. Check out the website RevelatorAlf.com, products links page for all this stuff there, and also you send in any questions that you like as well. And at some point I'll break down that engine and make some specific videos about that, I suppose. Not necessarily a full videos or series of videos of just breaking down the engine, but maybe I'll just pick out certain parts to show you. Anyway, right, catch you again. Ta-da.